Welcome back to the channel today, guys. And yes, I am back from my weekend getaway, and I'm exhausted. I'll just be so honest with you, I'm very tired. But we're here to talk about some Classroom of the Elite today, and we had a very interesting episode today, actually. Not in the sense of a lot happened, because really a lot didn't, but we're getting into an arc from the light novel that I would argue isn't really that important, but the stuff it sets up in the arc is important, if that makes sense. The arc itself feels kind of like a filler arc, and you will see that soon enough, but it has very important events in it, and a lack of an important event too, which we'll get into. But let's talk about Classroom of the Elite, Season 2, Episode 7 today. So right off the bat, I have to mention, because in my previous episode I did say that we were supposed to get a very important scene at the beginning of this episode with a particular character who I put in the thumbnail of a video, actually, a couple weeks ago. But it turns out they've apparently moved that scene somewhere else. And I have a good idea of where they've put it, but it's supposed to be right here at the beginning of this episode, so we'll leave it at that for now until it comes up. But right away, our episode itself begins on a very important note with Horikita's brother, the current student council president, stepping down from his position and giving the presidency to a new character introduced, Nagumo. Now, in case you guys don't know, this show is already greenlit for a Season 3. Season 3 is already on the way. I'm not lying or joking. You can check it out. It's scheduled for 2023. And they cut a lot of this conversation out of this episode, actually. Because originally in the books, Horikita's brother gives Nagumo the new position. And he makes a kind of a wild decree right there in front of all the students. And they kind of cut that out in this episode. Because I'll tell you right now, this isn't a spoiler, but stuff dealing with Nagumo and all that will undoubtedly be Season 3. For sure. Everything they would discuss in that scene is definitely going to be Season 3, and I guess they didn't want us to get that info yet. They want us to deal with this season first, and then probably at the end they'll give us that information. Because I have a very good idea where we're going to end in this season now. But yes, that was a very important scene that they kind of left out. So I just wanted to give you guys some information on that. Now after the assembly, we see Ionokoji walking out of the building. And he meets up with Katsuragi, who kind of says, congratulations on the sports festival. You were magnificent. Like I said, guys, double-edged sword, but we'll get into that soon. And he gives Ionokoji a friendly piece of advice. He tells him, Horikita should really look out for Ryune. He's a wily person. If there's anyone to worry about in this school, it's him. But Ionokoji counters him and says, you worked with him which he did in Season 1. And he says, I regret that even now. And he tells Ionokoji, just know we're united against him. Which means every class personally has a grudge against Class C and are working to take them out. They are truly the target of the school right now. But it's here we transition to a very different scene, actually. One that really reminds you that, oh wait, this is a school too at the end of the day. This is an actual school with kids in it too. Wait a minute. And it's here we meet Sado. Now, for all intents and purposes, Sado is a background character in Class D. You'll see in this arc, actually, that a lot of characters that are in the class but don't necessarily get their time to shine or to be in the forefront of things, we'll see that start to change a little bit more in this coming arc. And that might be a good thing or a bad thing to you, And I think you guys will really understand what I mean next week. But we get Sado here, and she's kind of crushing hard on her boy Ionokoji after the events of the sports festival. Because as I said in my previous episode, everyone in the school is paying attention to him now. His him wanting to be invisible and in the background is over whether he wants it to be or not. And our girl Sado has noticed him, and she confesses to him. Not necessarily confesses to him, let me rephrase that. She kinda wants to exchange contact information because she was so captivated by him in the festival. Which he agrees, because he really doesn't have a reason not to. And that's really all for Sado. For now, at least. And it's here that we transition to the main crux of our episode today. So this little arc in our show is called the Paper Shuffle. That is the new exam that we are heading into. And to tell you guys the truth, this is a weird position we're in this little arc. Because I'd argue the exam itself takes a pretty big backseat in this arc. And we really focus on the characters in this exam, you know? The exam itself is kind of in the background. It's not the important part of this little arc of ours. It's to introduce some characters and to really flush out some more. And again, in the next coming episodes, I think you guys will know exactly what I mean. But the exam goes like this. This exam will be a group effort. There will be people that are broken up into pairs in every single class. This is a 2-person exam, so you will be doing this with a partner. But to determine that partner, you will take another test before then, and they haven't explained exactly why or how your partner will be determined yet. But through this test, you will find out your partner, and then you and your partner will take the exam together. But there's a twist. In the paired up section of the test, if even one pair out of them gets below the minimum requirement of 60, that means that both people are expelled. So in the instance that Sai gives in the anime, what if Iki and Hirata were paired up? If Iki got a 0%, they could still win if Hirata got a 60%, if that makes sense. But at the same time, both sides have to get scores good enough to get an overall bar of approval. So she even gives another example of, in previous years, it's 700 points. So in total, both of you across these 6 tests you're taking together have to score above 700 points combined. So zeros would very much hurt you in a situation like this. Now, if you guys are wondering, wow, that's really not that much information, it's a little confusing. It's because a main part of this arc is actually figuring out some of the test rules and all that. That's why they didn't tell us everything exactly in this episode. And it's kind of hard for me. I'm trying to tiptoe around the test's answers and what to do on it without spoiling anything for you guys. So it's kind of difficult in this instance, actually. Here's another little curveball we get, actually. The questions on this test are actually provided by another class. Each class has to come up with the questions for another class on this test. They have to come up with all of the questions. They're not forced to, but if they don't, then the questions that are presented to the other classes will be by the school, and they will be much easier. So the classes actually have a way of tricking the other classes, because they get to make the questions. But each class cannot pick like the same people. So for instance, if class A and D both want to go after class C, they're not going to be able to. So that's how it will get determined with how things go. I think it's quite interesting that each class gets to make the questions for other classes, which I think that enhances the difficulty a lot. And it's here that we transition after the explanation of the test to 2 quick little scenes of varying importance, I would argue. We get a quick scene of Ionokoji asking Horikita about the exam, and we really see how Horikita has definitely grown over the course of this season, where she asked Ionokoji to get everyone together so they can all come up with a plan together. And we all know she normally would never do this. So the events of this sports festival have really impacted her and sent her in a good direction, I guess you could say, as a character. She's steadily moving forward while starting to work with others. All a part of Ionokoji's plan, by the way. But we'll get into that a little later. But now we have a scene with K. Well, it's quite an interesting scene. Things are going to start getting much more interesting with K as we progress through the series. But the gist of it right now is, I guess you could say she started to become a little more conscious of Ayanokoji, in a way, if you will. The best way I can describe it is she's starting to become more dependent, if that makes sense. They have quite an interesting relationship, to say the least, right now. I would not necessarily say there's any feelings or love right now. It's, like I just said, a dependence. He has made himself someone that she can't easily cast aside anymore. Because she even said it herself in the previous episode. She's like a leech. She latches on to someone and leeches off of them. That's just kind of how her character is. And Ionokoji has smoothly transitioned her to attach herself onto him instead of Hirata now. And that's kind of what we're seeing here, with her starting what appears to be a little bit jealous about his interaction with Sado. They have quite a very interesting relationship, guys, that will only get flushed out more throughout this season, so look forward to that. But I just wanted to mention that right away. We'll talk a bit more about that at the end of the episode, trust me. But I just wanted to throw that in for now. And it's here Horikis meets up with everyone and decides that, we need to go over a strategy meeting right now. Let's go meet up at the cafe and discuss what's going on. And in this scene, yet again, we see another scene showcasing how K has become much more conscious around Ayanokoji. It's a pretty awkward scene that I'm really glad they actually included in the anime from the book. I'm really glad they did. It definitely felt off, and it was supposed to. But she tells everyone to go on ahead. I need to go do something real quick. So her and Ionokoji kind of head back a bit. Because during their conversation, who should come and try to butt in but Kushina? Now, if you guys remember from our previous episode, she was the traitor all along. And she's actively working against them to undermine them in every single way imaginable. So you would think Horikis would be like, nah, I don't want you in the group. But no, she welcomes her with open arms into their group. And as she's hanging back and talking with Ayanokoji, she says, I don't like getting into other people's backgrounds. It's not my business, but I'm going to tell you a bit about Kushina's background and why I let her in this group. She explains to Ionokoji that, I didn't realize this until recently, but I was in middle school with Kushina. We weren't in the same class, of course, so it took me a while to remember, but we were in middle school together, and there was this one rumor in our school about how one class just completely fell apart and tore itself apart at the seams, and how at the center of it, it was caused by one female student. And she believes that's Kushina. Obviously, all rumors, of course, but she believes it's Kushina. And she asked Ionokoji, how could one student tear apart an entire class? And Ionokoji tells her there are a lot of ways to do something like that. And he asks Horikis, what is the strongest thing in the world? And she believes it's violence, actually. Which she's not wrong about. But that's not Kushina's style. So Ionokoji asks her an important question that the anime really doesn't hang on too much. It's like, what if she wields something that's like violence? What is a power in the world that's as strong as violence? What does Kushina have that is as strong as that? I'm asking you guys that question too. It's a very important question, so remember that. And as they're walking away, Ionokoji just flat out tells her that Kushina is going to be a problem. We need to get rid of her. And Horikis says, you want to expel her? And he's like, better to get rid of an obstacle now than when it becomes a problem. Which is not wrong. But Horikis doesn't want to do that. She wants to work with Kushina, claiming that she can be a very powerful ally. Which is not wrong. You know, for as twisted and demented as she actually is, she could prove to be very useful if they can get her to work on their side. And Ionokoji even asks her, like, can you do that? Can you get her on our side? And Horikis says, I'm gonna try. Which, very interesting situation. Horikis would want to be the one to keep her around. Very interesting. So Ionokoji tells her, alright, I'll watch from afar for right now. See how things play out. And we get a nice little scene where Horikis is like, you know, I didn't appreciate you butting in to my conversation with Ryunes before. Which I told you guys he did in the previous episode. That was all Ionokoji's idea, to set up that little meeting. He knew it was going to happen right then and there, so he had that all planned out from the very beginning. He knew all the events, even the fact that she was going to lose. And as much as she hated it that he was there and kind of saved her at the last second, she ends up thanking him. Of course. A really roundabout way to give someone thanks, but that's just like Horikis. And it's here that we transition to Ryunes. And it's here our boy Ryunes is not too happy about what happened in the previous episode. You know, he's trying to figure out who the mastermind in Class D is. You could say he starts becoming obsessed with it even. And he's trying to figure out who's the traitor in my class that leaked them the information. Who is this? So he's sniffing around his class. And he eventually comes upon Manabe. Which, if you guys remember, is actually the girl who bullied K earlier in our season. And he sniffs her out as the traitor pretty quickly. And I gotta say, man, they made it way more violent in the anime than in the book. In the book, I don't believe he hit her at all. But nah, in the anime, he's just smacking her up. Slamming her head into the desk. I'm like, Jesus, yo. And he quickly figures out, yeah, it was her. So they sit down and talk, and in this situation, he figures out that, oh, you guys did this because he had dirt on you, huh? Okay. Maybe we can use this to our advantage. And in this situation, Manabe tells him everything that transpires. So he knows about Kay, her past with bullying, all that. And he's starting to get a read on who the mastermind is. Because they were blackmailed into doing that information by a picture of them bullying her. And they reveal that the only people that were there that could have taken this picture are Yukimura or Ayanokoji. And it's here in this situation, now that he has that info, that he starts kind of metaphorically tightening the noose around the mastermind's neck. At least in his opinion. Now that he has at least a lead on possible candidates. He even remarks that, because Ibuki says that, I've had run-ins with Ayanokoji before. I don't think he's the person at all. And Ryunes even says, you know, if it was him, it really would be too obvious. He's always been there, though. That's how that little interaction ends. So now we actually meet up with Horikis and Ionokoji as they're meeting with the group. And they discuss what they're going to do on this exam. And to be honest, they completely figure it out. Because the question we've had is, alright, so there's going to be pairs on this exam, but we haven't determined how these pairs are made. And that's what the first test does. It determines how you get paired up with someone. And Horikis figures out how they do that. You see, in every year, multiple students always get expelled in this particular exam. That's because they don't know the trick. The trick is that they pair up the highest scoring students with the lowest scoring students. That way they become average. So, from her explanation, they even say that for us to win this and to get good pairings, we're going to divide the class into 4 separate groups. The 2 groups that score really high, or at least averagely high, and then the 2 lowest scoring groups. Now, the students that score high, score as high as you can, obviously. Obviously, do as much as you can. But the students that are really bad and don't know anything, we want you to score a 0. Don't answer anything. Get a 0% on the test. And then the second lowest group, you get a 1. So that way, they can kind of pick who they want the pairings to be, so that they're not pairing up like 2 really bad academic students together in a way. It's honestly quite smart. So this way you can determine the pairings so that you always get someone who's really smart or at least like average enough, and then someone who's not, so they'll balance out with each other so that everyone can pass. It makes perfect sense once you think about it, honestly. And she figures out the first exam's true big hurdle, which is the rules. They even determine what class they want to go after. Because as I said earlier in our episode, that they make the questions for another class. So unanimously, they all decide that we're going after Class C. Class C is who we're going after. And that is how they're going to handle the exam. Now let's transition over to K and Ionokoji. Now, as I said, these two have a kind of a complicated relationship, I guess you could say, where I wouldn't really say it's love. At least not right now. It's really not. The anime frames it that way very heavily, but it's really not right now. It's kind of like a dependence. Because throughout the course of our series, we've realized how Kei is as a character. How she's actually a very fragile character in our series. And that she even described herself kind of as a leech that kind of latches on to someone for support and all that. Now, throughout the course of our show, that person has been Hirata. He has taken that role, I guess you could say, in stride and kind of been there shielding her from everything. That's not the case anymore. During this season, Ayanokoji kind of came in and replaced Hirata in that regard. So now she's dependent on him. Now she leans on him for support. And that's why she started to become so much more conscious around him. Because she's starting to kind of understand, I guess you could say, like, oh, I kind of need this guy. Like, I kind of need him. I kind of want him to be around now. So, while it's not necessarily love, it's dependence, attachment, I guess you could say. He's made himself irreplaceable to her. And in turn, that makes her a better pawn for him. Think of it like that. It'll make more sense as the season goes on, I promise you. But for now, that's really the extent of our relationship. And I think this gets highlighted even more by the fact that she constantly brings up Sado. Now, yes, it most likely is partially because of jealousy. But another underlying factor is that she's, which the anime does not describe very much in this episode at least, is that she's worried that if Ayanokoji finds someone who's more, I guess you could say, more qualified to take her place, she's worried that he's going to up and replace her. Like I said, very complicated situation they have. She really doesn't know how she feels right now. She's all over the place with her emotions. And she's worried that Ionokoji's going to replace her. So that's why she constantly is bringing up Sado in this episode, out of concerns for that. And the conversation ends with him asking about Manabe and her friends, because, again, previously in the season, they bullied her and all that. So, for her, to put her, I guess, at a peace of mind, and to reassure her that, yeah, I will protect you if anything happens again. Yeah, he constantly asks these questions. Now, a lot of people would like to say it's because, yeah, he's just being considerate. Yeah, kinda, but the real purpose of it is so that he can kind of use her more. If he understands the situation that's going on between them, he can kind of make her need to depend on him more. And again, in turn, makes her more useful to him. So, it's a little messed up when you think about it, but all's fair in the world, man. And at this point in our show, Class D is as strong as ever. They have a new sense of unity, where Ayanokoji has started to successfully mold Horikita the way he kind of wants her to be. Where she can be the leader and the figurehead of the class, without him having to step in and do anything. Which has been his whole goal this whole time. To get her in a position to prosper and then back out. We'll see that soon enough. But our episode ends with us getting the results of the tests and our pairings. And if you guys pay attention, we get some pretty interesting pairings. but Ionokoji actually gets paired with Sado. And we'll see a bit more about that in next week's episode. So, what do you guys think? Like I said, this episode was a slower episode. It's setting up a new arc, and not even that important of an arc. The real importance of this arc is the characters. We really dive into a lot of different characters in this arc, actually. That is the important thing. And we'll really see that next week, I imagine. But let me know what you guys thought of this episode, What do you think Kei and Ayanokoji's relationship is like? I kind of want to know in the comments. Let me know. Just from like an anime standpoint only, what do you believe is going on? Who knows? Maybe you're more right than you think. But that'll be it, guys. Like I said, this show is great, and especially now that I know the pacing of this, I know exactly where we're gonna end, and it's gonna be fantastic. So until next time, guys, I hope you have a great day, week, month, and year. And until then, deuces, and have a blessed day. I'll see you guys next time.